On today's episode, I'm joined by Ali Abdaal, YouTuber, podcast host, junior doctor, and so much more. I've been fortunate enough to watch his journey from the very start, and he is a living masterclass of how to successfully build and also pivot your personal brand. His videos on YouTube alone have amassed over 173 million views. So if you want to create content, if you want to launch a YouTube channel, build your personal brand, become a more intentional and efficient version of yourself, then this episode is for you. So without further ado, Ali Abdaal.
A lot of influencers / creators don't act as entrepreneurs. And I think that's an area in which I want to encourage more people to think like businesses, to think like business owners, think like entrepreneurs. I think to an extent there's like a balance, right, between the business side and the creative / art side. And I suspect most creators that I know are too much on the artsy creativity side. But as soon as you're trying to make money from this thing, and most people, even if they're like, oh, I don't want to make money, I just want to have fun, they do have some sort of profit motive. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do it.
Ali Abdaal, goodness gracious me, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's so weird to see you in the flesh, having followed your YouTube channel since like the early days. Back in the day, one of the big inspirations of like Cambridge vlogger YouTubers of like, I remember when I started on YouTube, I was like, damn, Joe Binder got to like 20,000 subscribers in the first year. Oh my God, that's completely unattainable. I was like, okay, I'm going to set my sights at like 5,000 in the first year. And I was always looking at your stuff because you were like, I remember you were sort of like boosted boarding around in Cambridge, and like the way that you were doing your storytelling in the vlogs was so good. And I was like, damn, I need to get better at storytelling. So thank you for the inspiration.
Thank you so much. It's a bit of a blast from the past. I was obsessed with YouTube and I was obsessed with Casey Neistat. Yeah,
it was very Casey style of videos you were making.
Very Casey. So when Casey did something, I did it.
Nice.
And the first thing I remember was I just got back from Berlin. I did an internship and I was back in Cambridge and I had taken this whole new me, that I got from Berlin. I was wearing different clothes.
Oh, nice.
I was riding around on, it wasn't quite a boosted board, it was a penny board, which looked it looked less cool than a boosted board or a skateboard.
Yep.
And I was riding around holding a huge DSLR across King's Parade, and I could just feel people looking at me.
The judgment.
That's not what you do in Cambridge. And I actually spoke about that in a video. I said I have to retrain myself to give zero shits again. And we can start there actually.
Yeah.
The concept of giving zero shits, of being your full self in public, of dancing in the rain, whatever it is, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm keen. I think there is the way that I approach content creation and stuff is kind of probably more intentional than the impression that I'd like to give out. In that I think it pays to give a sort of like, oh, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along, kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing. But I think like intentional transparency is like really useful, because even though like obviously over time production values have gone up and there's a lot of people doing high octane content and stuff, there are still so few people being like radically transparent on the internet. And therefore that becomes a very kind of an easy way to stand out if you're comfortable doing it. So that was a big part of why I'm keen on just sort of being as authentic as possible online. Yeah,
I see that. I see all the work you do, and so I really hear what you mean in terms of radical transparency. The first example that comes to my mind is when I watched one of your videos and you're saying, hey, here's how much money I make. And I saw it and I thought, you know what, this is classic YouTuber. It's a really clickbaity title. I'm absolutely going to click on it because I have an interest in wealth creation, in business, in YouTubers. And I clicked on it and I was a little bit taken aback, because here you were, literally saying how much money you're making. So it's what you'd expect from the title, but nobody does that. My question on that is, when you're talking about finances and how much money you make, particularly in Britain, particularly when, I know a little bit about your background, I know that there were certain expectations from your parents in terms of your career choice. How did that feel, saying publicly on the internet that you are making not just money, you're making millions of pounds?
Yeah, it feels, it probably, like to me, it actually doesn't feel that weird, because I think over the last few years, I've gotten so much value out of other people being transparent about how much money they earn on the internet as well. So there are some YouTubers, people like Graham Stephan, there are some podcasters, the Indie Hackers podcast, people like Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income, these people have done a lot of the groundwork in terms of being honest about earnings and stuff. And when I first discovered Pat Flynn's podcast, the content was amazing, but what really struck out to me was his monthly income reports, where he just posted on his website, this is how much we're making from all the sources, here's how much everything costs. And you're thinking, damn, you can make that much money from affiliate marketing, what the hell? And so when I started making interesting amounts of money on the internet, that was a thing where I sort of put myself into the mindset of me from a few years ago, where, how would I have felt if a YouTuber that I looked up to was just being transparent about how much they earned, and not doing a bit of caveating, but not trying to be overly humble about it, overly oh my god, but I don't know. I think there is a value in just sort of straight up front saying the numbers, and people can take it how they want.
What about people who aren't on the internet? What about friends of yours who you've grown up with, where you may know their salaries? What about family, where things like that aren't typically discussed?
I think they should be. You know the whole be the change you want to see in the world. I'm not okay. I don't want to pretend that the reason I do that is for anything other than to get views. But there is an element of I genuinely think more people should be transparent about money. And if I ask my friends, how much are you earning at McKinsey or Bain, and they're cagey about it, I'm like, dude, why? Why are you being cagey about this? We're friends. We've known each other for 10 plus years at this point. What the fuck does it matter? What your salary is? It's just kind of interesting. It's useful for more people to be transparent about this, so that it becomes easier for people to negotiate salaries, people to know how much they're worth. I don't know. I want to be that change and encourage more of my friends and family to talk transparently about salaries. Even though my grandma's always Ali, why are you talking about money? It's bad. Some of my aunts and uncles, aunts mostly, are there's this concept in Islam of the evil eye, that people will speak about you behind your back, and that will incur the wrath of God in some capacity. But yeah, just got to get over it.
Yeah, be the change you want to see. I like that. And I mean, ultimately, it's not that deep.
It's just
not that deep.
Yeah.
Sharing those things, I think it's, like you, I think it's really positive. And I love when other people do it. I mean, when I start calls with, and it's always within a business context, I'll never ask a randomer or somebody I meet at a party, how much money do you earn?
Yeah.
That I think is a little bit weird.
Yes.
But when I have a kind of call with a client or any kind of call with a business person, one of the first questions is, what are you doing in revenue? Sometimes they're taken aback. For the most part, they just answer me squarely, hey, we're about to hit 30K this month. We did 5K this month, whatever it is. There have been times recently, and it's only happened once or twice, when somebody said, what? And actually got quite offended. And I had this, similar reaction too. I was like, why wouldn't you
Yeah, I mean, it's a business metric, who cares?
It's a business metric, Who cares exactly? And also it's not take home, right? There's a level of objectivity that you have with a business's revenue. Perhaps it's different when it comes to salary, because that is more your personal take home.
Yeah.
But when it comes to business, you can do 5 million a year. Your salary may be 80 grand, 50 grand, 20, so I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is this objectivity that comes with business metrics where, what's your revenue, what are your margins and stuff is more socially acceptable than, hey, what's your salary? How much are your mortgage payments?
Yeah.
But even that level of stuff, I think between friends should be completely fair game.
Good. I like that. I'm with you. You mentioned YouTube earlier, and you were very kind about my YouTube channel. So thank you.
I just remember there was one video where I think you did a video talking about how to be a vlogger or something. And if I remember correctly, one of the things you said was speak to the camera as if it's a single person. And that was a tip that really changed my approach to speaking on camera. So thank you for that one as well.
My pleasure.
I remember that really stuck out to me because I was trawling the internet trying to find advice on how to be a vlogger, and then I saw your video. I was like, damn, this is good advice.
That's wicked. I love it. And before I started vlogging, before Ibs Mo started vlogging, before Holly from Cambridge started vlogging, there was, of course, Jake Wright.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the OG. He was the OG Cambridge vlogger. And I remember when I started vlogging, I thought, how am I going to build an audience, right? And I had just done 30 consecutive back-to-back vlogs whilst I was doing the internship in Berlin. People didn't care. They had no interest. I was some random bloke on the internet, and I didn't give them a reason to care. And then there was one, do you remember Caroline Calloway?
Yes. Yeah.
So she said to me at one point, Joe, stop sharing your YouTube channels on Facebook and being upset. Well, me communicating to her, I'm upset. Stop being upset that people don't care, because as much as your friends love you, they don't love vlogs. So you're preaching to the wrong choir. They're not going to watch your videos. You've got to think, where are the YouTube watchers? And then find them. So I took that piece of advice, and I then thought, okay, well, Jake Wright has this brilliant, engaged audience of people who want to know what it's like to be at Cambridge. and are interested in his videos. So I got a little bit growth hacky, and I went on to Jake Wright's videos, post notifications on, and as soon as he would post a new video, I would jump in as Joe Binder and say something along the lines of brilliant video. I love it for this reason. It's so great to see a fellow Cambridge vlogger around here.
Nice.
And then I would sign out of that account and sign into like 5 different fake burner accounts, give them a like, and then give it half an hour. That's the most liked one. And it just sits at the top. And I got a lot of followers off the back of growth hacks.
I see people doing that on my account, and I don't like it anymore. I like hide those people from the channel because their names are like Dimitri Smith dash personal development, finance, productivity.
Yeah,
giving some Aristotle. If they had watched the video and commented something on it and then upvoted it, I'd feel like, okay, fine, fair play. But it's some random quote from Socrates. Like, Socrates says, "Live your best life." 18 upvotes. I'm like, okay, this is clearly fake burner account notifications on. This person is getting shadow banned. But
poor Dimitri Smith listening to this podcast and hearing you out him like that.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, Dimitri. So, I mean, one thing that I wanted to ask you was whether or not you believe that influencers are entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah, yes. in all the ways. I think a lot of influencers / creators don't act as entrepreneurs, and I think that's an area in which I want to encourage more people to think like businesses, to think like business owners, think like entrepreneurs. I think to an extent there's like a balance, right, between the business side and the creative / art side. And I suspect most creators that I know are too much on the artsy creativity side. But as soon as you're trying to make money from this thing, and most people, even if they're like, oh, I don't want to make money, I just want to have fun, they do have some sort of profit motive, otherwise they probably wouldn't do it. Then it is helpful to start thinking like an entrepreneur and reading books about entrepreneurialism and about startups and about running a business. And I've benefited massively from reading those sorts of books over the last 3+ years, and I wish I'd discovered them sooner. Yeah.
And so where do YouTubers go wrong? So just so you know, in my head, when I think of influencers and YouTube people with regard to this question, I'm thinking about, you know, the people who are in my shoes, who saw Casey Neistat doing bits, who saw you know, KSI just making a great living and wanting to be a little bit like them. Where do they go wrong in terms of the specifics of being too creative and being less business focused?
Yeah, I think with your niche, it is like I have very little experience in it, because broadly there's like entertainment content and then there's educational content. And I very much specialize in educational content, whereas Casey specializes in entertainment with a little bit of a dose of education and inspiration in there. And I think similarly, yes, your vlogs were showing life as a Cambridge student, but they were quite entertainment-y in that the way that you were putting them together, the editing, the Casey Neistat vibes. I think if I speak for the educational space, because that's mostly the creators that I kind of hang out with and who come to me for advice, it's I think one area in which they go wrong is like not understanding the target market, not understanding what their own unfair advantages are, not answering those questions of like, you know, who is my target audience, who is that person who is going to be screaming my name from the rooftops and telling all their friends about me because they vibe so hard with my content. When Tim Ferriss wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, he was targeting it at like a, you know, college educated Silicon Valley male somewhere between the age of 22 and 28, and this person had interests in entrepreneurship and finance and wanting to make money, blah 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 blah. He had a very specific avatar in mind when he wrote the book, and that's not to say the book didn't touch people beyond that, but I think the more specific the person that you speak to can be, or is, the easier it is to target that message.
Yeah.
And so I think a bunch of YouTubers don't do the market research and sort of wing it as they go along, which is fine. It works for some people, but I think that's one way to be more intentional about it. I think other things are just, you know, incorporating batching, filming multiple videos in one sitting, treating videos as a bunch of slow burns rather than a single heavy lift at a time. This is all stuff. I have a 6-week course where I teach this stuff, so it's like sort of hours and hours and hours of content in my head about how people can be a little bit more entrepreneurially with the way they approach their creative side hustle.
Okay, brilliant. I like that. And I think, again, agree, if you can treat anything like a business, it feels really wrong to say your social life, but ultimately, I've put in diaries. Like I have a diary for my weekend now. I have a shared calendar with my boyfriend, so things go directly into my calendar, and same with his.
That's so good.
It just works so well.
There was something my brother and I were discussing at one point on our podcast, which is the idea that a lot of gains in your personal life you can make by treating it more like a business. And a lot of gains in your business you can make more by treating it more like a personal life. And I think there's a lot of like kind of middle ground between these two things, where businesses are very intentional about the way they spend their founders' time, and yet we're often not intentional about the way we spend our time personally and in our social life and stuff. And we probably should be. You know, businesses will have like a CRM, like to keep track of all the customers. You probably have one of these, like people you've reached out to, when their birthdays are, how often you want to keep in touch with them.
Yeah.
That kind of system for a personal life is also really useful. Like, no one bats an eyelid if you have people's birthdays on your calendar. But I have a reminder in my Todoist to call my grandma every other day. And it just, it's this thing that I've decided to be more intentional about. And I'm applying the principles of like productivity and business to this thing in my personal life. And that reminds me to call her every other day.
Yeah.
I still don't do it, but I do it more often than I would have done had I not had this thing reminding me of it.
No, exactly. I think that's the best way of doing it. I had a note in my diary to wish my friend Gid happy birthday. And I told him that I had a note. He was like, Joe, come on, you should know my birthday. And I was like, I know your birthday, but I need to make sure that I remember on the day. And I live by my calendar. This way I will call you. And I FaceTimed him at like 7 a.m.
Nice.
And I woke him up.
Solid. That's good.
Great
Good friend.
birthday start, right?
I was interviewing an author just before this. He's written a book called 4,000 Weeks, which is about like intentionally using our time and about like a philosophical approach to recognize that like time is finite and we should not try and optimize every second of it. But one of the things he was saying is this idea of instantaneous gratitude, where this morning I had the thought that, there's this guy who's been like a coach and a mentor to me this year. I should send him a Christmas present or like a thank you message or something like that. And I put it in my to-do list of like to send. But what this author Oliver was saying was that when it comes specifically to things like gratitude, yes, there's obviously note down your friends' birthdays to wish them happy birthday. But if you do have that thought of like, oh, I'm thinking about this person right now, let me send them a message. That is actually worth interrupting whatever you're doing for the sake of sending that message, because all of the stuff around gratitude being like one of the most important drivers of happiness, plus relationship being the most important thing in life. So I really like that sort of kind of systems-based approach to gratitude, intentionality, and relationships, and that if I have a thought, I will stop whatever I'm doing, even if I'm in the middle of filming a video, and just do that nice thing for 2 minutes and then get back to my...
That's nice. Yeah. And I think in terms of gratitude, you really get that and believe that once you've tried it. Like, I cry most days.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's really quite strange, but it's like a good cry.
How does that happen?
Well, I'll just be out here chilling on the train, going into work, and I'll be watching TikToks. And I'll see the most adorable video of a US Army soldier surprising his young son and daughter at their school assembly.
Nice.
And it's a classic, Daddy's home.
Yeah.
And then they run up, big hug, everyone's crying, right? Adorable.
Yeah.
So then I'm there wiping my tears away on the train. And it's that kind of vibe I always get really emotional about. So I watch those videos and then I can't help but think about my family and the people close to me. So I get really emotional before I've even got to the office, before I even started my day. And I also think that gratitude is contagious.
Yeah.
So a few months ago, I was walking to the office. I walked and it was really early, maybe around 7 a.m. in Camden. And there's this pub on the corner of our road, which has these like amazing hanging baskets. And I saw first time I've ever seen somebody actually trimming and deadheading the flowers and making sure that it was all, nicely done. And in London, you're kind of taught not to speak to other people, right? Strangers don't talk to strangers. But I just thought, I want to speak to her. I want to say something. And I walked past and then I was like, should I turn around? So I turned around and I said, hi, how you doing? I just want to let you know, I walk past those flowers every morning and it always gives my day like a really nice start. They're just really nice and well kept and whatever it was, I said a sweet thing. And just a look on her face said, no one has ever commented at 7 a.m. about me deadheading flowers. It was just a really nice moment for me, but also for her. So I definitely think, gratitude, being grateful for the things around you, but also then communicating that, there is a level of that is contagious in a good way and it spreads.
Love it. I'm tearing up thinking about that. That's great. Great stuff.
Great stuff. Talk to me about ego. Do you think you have a big ego? Do you think that's a bad thing? Do you think it's a good thing that you can harness?
I guess ego defined as like self-image. I think there's two things. There's like the size of ego and then the fragility of ego. And I think like ego is generally considered like a negative thing. And you've got books like Ryan Holiday, ego is the enemy, etc. I think I'm thinking out loud here, but I feel like I probably have a pretty big ego defined as like self-image, but I don't think it's particularly fragile, in that I'm not particularly wedded to my image of myself, and I'm always looking for ways to improve and enjoy hearing criticism and stuff. And I'm very kind of growth mindset-y, if I can toot my own trumpet. So yeah, I think that it's that balance of like self-confidence, but also the tension between like self-acceptance and self-improvement.
Yeah.
And I think I generally err too much towards the self-improvement side, but I'm trying to get better at the self-acceptance side. And I don't know if that's the same as having a big ego. It doesn't feel, cause like the phrase big ego feels like negative, but I'm not quite sure what that gets at.
I think, the entire concept of ego feels really negative. But I'm just thinking, you started making videos on YouTube and you got a few people watching them, and then a few hundred, few thousand. You now have millions of people following. And how many total video views do you have on YouTube alone?
Videos like 480, 500, something like that.
No, video views.
Oh, video views. God, no idea.
Total.
No idea. It's 70 million this year. I don't know what the total number is. Yeah.
It's a huge amount of people, right? So how does that make you feel from an ego perspective? There's got to be moments that you've been through where you've had to kind of call yourself out a little bit and tone yourself down and think, look, yes, I'm great. I'm out here. I'm doing it. However, I've got to stay humble.
That's a good question. I think it's translated into greater self-confidence, which might come across as arrogance to some people. Because I think the line between confidence and arrogance is fairly thin and is often in the eye of the beholder. And so to a lot of people, it might seem arrogant to be talking about how much money you're making on the internet. To some other people, it might be confident. Or to other people, it just might be a complete neutral, like they don't really care.
Yeah.
I know, for example, like knowing that I have some kind of following on the internet and people listen to what I have to say makes me more comfortable to express ideas in social settings, for example, where in the past I might have thought, oh, why does my opinion on this thing matter? Now I sort of think, actually, maybe my opinion is valid. Maybe it might be kind of interesting to share, and I'd be more comfortable sharing that than I was maybe a few years ago.
That's great. That's wicked.
Yeah, I think in the dating world as well. I think my image of myself in the past for a long time was that I was a massive nerd and a loser, and that why would someone I'd be interested in want to be interested in me? And I think through the kind of I don't know, fame, attention, status, prestige, whatever you want to call it, through the YouTube channel, I now kind of feel more confident in the dating market, knowing that, okay, like even if this person doesn't like it, that's totally fine. Like there's other people out there. So I think it has really served as a self-confidence boosting machine. That's
great. It's good for so many reasons. It brings up a quote that you said, which I think you were paraphrasing somebody else, and you made that clear. But when you put content out there into the world, you increase the surface area for lucky events to happen. And I love that. That's great. And so that applies in dating. It applies in kind of confidence in what you're saying. The way you described kind of getting that validation online that you have a say and your say is important. It's basically how I use my Twitter, right?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
My Twitter is my diary, but it's also a place for me to test content. Now, I don't have a big audience at all, so I can say what I want. And I find that fun. But it also means that if I put something on Twitter and it gets 5 likes, right, instead of 2, then that's becoming a LinkedIn post. And then that LinkedIn post gets 500 likes, and it's like, whoa,
nice.
It's something that clearly resonates with the Twitter audience, and it's something that resonates much deeper than just, the mere fact that they saw on Twitter. And then I use that as a testing ground, almost how you can see the audience's reaction to your content, your views, as a testing ground that you then apply in person.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Nice.
The reason I asked you about ego was because I thought it would be an interesting one given how many people follow you, but also I've experienced things where friends have called me out and said, bro, what are you doing? This is doing nothing for you. So a friend of mine, Tim Armu, he's a young guy, really successful businessman. I did a podcast once and he sent me the link on WhatsApp and he just said, why? And I was like, what do you mean, why?
Yeah.
I was like, why'd you do this? And I said, it's practice, it's positioning for my personal brand, and it's audience building, new audiences. And he said, audience building, no, because you know that there's no huge viewership for this podcast. Positioning, also no, because there are no huge guests that you're aligning yourself with. Practice, maybe, sure. But is it all of that, or is it ego? And when I read the message, I was like, first of all, we haven't spoken in like 3 weeks. Whoa, this is a lot. But then I was like, actually, you're making a really good point, because it feels nice to be invited onto something.
Yep.
And then the same thing happened a few weeks later. The metaverse happened, right? Facebook rebranded as Meta. And I went, crazy with my ideas. I was like, wow, I need to find a company to invest in. This can be my first ever angel investment. So I tweeted saying, is there any kind of, who's building something cool in the metaverse? I want this to be my first angel investment. And then spoke to Tim again, great guy. And he's like, this isn't it. And I was like, what do you mean? Why? The metaverse is going to be huge. I'm telling you, 10 years time. And then he kind of jumped in. He was like, no, the metaverse is irrelevant. It's, you got such a great opportunity here in building your business. You found something that works, and it's so easy to slip into the kind of lifestyle of being a young founder where you have a business and then you have the angel investor in this, angel investor in that. And it's small checks, right? So there's not a huge potential financial return, but I had a really good conversation with him about it. And he was like, I've been there. I've done all of those things, which is why I'm saying it to you. And I've thought a lot about things like that now. And I realized a lot of the things that I do or get excited about, it's like, wow, yeah, this does great things for my ego. It makes me feel good, makes me feel wanted, makes me feel liked. But my main focus is to build the business. It's not doing anything for the growth of the business.
Ah, interesting. That's a good point. It reminds me of, there's a book I read recently called The Status Game by Will Storr, where basically the thesis of the book is everything we do in life is with the intention of garnering social status in some capacity or another. And there's another book called the Elephant in the Brain, which kind of talks about the selfish motives behind everyday life. And there's a quote apparently from JP Morgan, which is that a man always has two reasons for doing something. The good reason and the real reason. And I often think about that when it comes to, why am I really writing a book? Why am I really doing this YouTube thing? The good reason is, well, it's fun, it makes money, it inspires people, blah, blah, blah. The real reason, fame, money, ego, attention, status, prestige, etc., etc. And I think, I don't know, like over time I've become comfortable with the fact that everything has a dual, everyone's motivations are multifactorial. Yes, the reason I go to the gym is to seem more attractive to the opposite sex. But going to the gym is broadly a good thing for my life anyway. So I'm gonna try not to beat myself up too much about the purity of the motive behind it, and instead just be a bit like, yeah, to be honest, everyone's playing a status game. I am too. And I think as long as we're like aware of that, then and as long as it doesn't overly hinder our functioning, then that's what's important.
Exactly. I think the most important part of all of it is the self-awareness. Because if you're aware of it and you know that you get, excited and interested in certain things, but perhaps it's for, a different reason, then you can kind of reel back.
Yeah. I would push back on your ego point though, around the podcast, because I'm not sure, like, do you think you really were going on that podcast because you wanted the feeling of being liked or being wanted?
So the wider context there,
yeah.
And bear in mind when I mentioned Tim's a good friend of mine, so it was very okay for him to send those messages. The podcast that he was referring to, like, he was absolutely right. He really was. And I had already kind of spoken to a load of other people about appearing on their podcast, and I had to have a really, frank conversation with myself and just thought, I'm limited for time. We are growing as a business. We've got 16 people. There's one of me. We've got a load of clients. Like, I need to be really mindful of how I'm spending my time. And so when I'm appearing on podcasts or I'm doing any kind of speaking, I need to weigh that up against the opportunity cost. And there's a big opportunity cost, even with small little pockets of half an hour here and an hour there. And when I applied that thinking to, those particular podcasts, it made a lot of sense. And it was, for me, it was like, wow, this feels like I'm doing great. People are asking me to be on their podcast. So,
got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I've definitely run into that thing as well, where time is limited. What are the heuristics I'm using to make decisions about how I spend my time? And so coming on this podcast, for example, the only reason was I just want to be mates with you. And this is a very easy way for us to get to know one another in a context that there is something more tangible being created other than just you and I having a coffee. I wasn't really thinking about audience size or about anything to that effect. I sometimes like being on podcast to build relationships.
Yeah, No, I mean, but that's a good reason, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, two birds, one stone with this. We've never properly met and spoken to each other, but we've known about each other for years. So it's brilliant that you're here.
Podcast
Thank you
vibes.
so much.
Here we go.
When it comes to building a business, what are your ultimate goals? If you look at when you're 40, 50, 60, 70,
Yes.
what is it all for?
Good question. We've actually been working with a business coach on this exact thing. And our 10-year target is building a profitable business that helps people while having fun. And the guy was pushing back. He was like, you should put some numbers on it, make it a smart goal, make it inspiring, make it a moonshot, you know, serving 100 million people. I'm like, no, I actually don't care about any of that. All I want to do is build a profitable business that helps people while having fun. And that's the infinite game that I want to play. And so numbers, metrics, I like to think that I don't care about those things, in theory.
Can I challenge that?
Please.
Profitability.
Yeah.
Right? There's obviously a spectrum. You know, you can make £100 in profit 1 year, or you can make, 20 mil in profit.
Yeah, the only goal is profitability, not a level of profitability.
Okay. But surely there's some kind of figure. You know, I want my net worth to be 50 mil by the time I'm 40.
No.
200 mil. Nothing at all.
Nothing like that.
Okay. What if we flip it away from figures?
Yep.
Is there an element, and I assume there is, of like financial freedom? I don't want to have to worry about not being able to afford things.
There is. I think I'm past the point of financial independence, provided I keep my ego and consumerism in check. So certainly when I was younger, it was, how do I tick the box of financially independent as quickly as possible? How do I make as many income streams as possible, blah, blah, blah. Now it's more like, kind of been there, done that. What do I actually want to do with my life now? And how do I want to spend my time? What's the infinite game that I want to play? And broadly to me, that looks like reading, writing, and teaching, and maybe making videos, maybe writing books. And so the goal has now moved away from, I want to, I don't know. I mean, even with the whole financial independent thing, like people say that if you're going on this journey of like financial independence, you should have a number in mind. And I never really quite had a number in mind, but it's that thing of like, the more money you make, the more the goalposts shift. And I was speaking to a founder friend, acquaintance a few months ago, and he was like, he was saying with complete sincerity, he was like, yeah, I've probably got about 10 million in the bank right now, but I feel like when I have 25 million, that's when I'll be truly financially independent, because 4% withdrawal rate, that'll give me 1 million a year. That gets you a pretty reasonable house in New York or London, and then I can send the kids to private school. And I was just like, wow, this guy's actually being serious, that this is the way that he's thinking. Similarly, there's a book that you might have come across called The Great CEO Within, which talks about how even when you have 10 million in the bank, you won't feel comfortable. And the number that founders need to feel comfortable is 100 million. And he just leaves it there. And then he moves on to the next chapter about building a team. I just think that those numbers just seem so absurd because they're just bizarre. And there's, what's the other quote? There's another quote that says something like, how much money you need to feel satisfied is always twice as much as you currently have.
Right.
And so keeping all those things in mind, I think I needed to change the way I was approaching life to be not about chasing numbers and more about actually what are the things that matter. It's relationships and doing stuff that I like, and I don't know, enjoying my days and feeling like I'm being useful to someone or something. And none of that needs numbers or metrics associated with them.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely answer. Got no further questions on that.
Okay. I mean, I could be bullshitting myself. I'm more than happy to be challenged on that point, because this is a bit of a hot take amongst the business bros. But
yeah, it's a hot take. I mean, look, it's business and building businesses, particularly if you want to do it fast, is about setting goals and having something to tick off along the way.
Yeah.
So it's always helpful when you have specific numbers in mind. When it comes to personal net worth, it's a little bit different, because ultimately, what is the difference between 5 and 6, whether that's million or 5,000, and so on. I've always thought that, once you reach a certain level of personal wealth, it's like that there's not much else that you really need. But then I've spoken to people who have very much reached that level and doubled it and doubled it and doubled it. And the money isn't even a thing. Like, when I negotiate with these people, it's just so clear. This is a sport for them. They are playing a version of tennis in their head throughout that entire conversation, and they bloody love it. They enjoy the actual process of doing business. So whilst their, bank accounts, well, probably not their actual bank accounts, but their stock portfolios and their real estate portfolios are doing wonders, and they have a huge amount of money behind them. They just really enjoy the actual sport of business.
Nice. Yeah, and that's totally fair. I'm keen on people enjoying the journey rather than being fixated on a destination.
Yeah, I like that. Final thing for this podcast is about legacy. The podcast is called Stamp Your Mark, and it's about, what is the change that we want to make and then leave in the world. So what are your reflections on that?
I haven't thought about this too much, but I like Naval's point of view, which is that legacy is a myth, and we're all going to be forgotten within within like one generation of the time we die. Therefore, spending any amount of time thinking what legacy do I want to leave in the world is a bit of a waste of time. I broadly agree with that. If I think about like the impact I want to have while I'm alive, then one exercise I found helpful recently is, call it the gravestone technique. Asking yourself the question of what do you want written on your gravestone. And for me, it's some combination of good dad, good husband, and inspirational teacher. And so right now, I think that if I could live a life where I'm broadly happy and teaching people and they're feeling inspired and learning stuff, that's the impact I want to have in the world.
It's a wonderful end. However, I would like to just do a quick backflip back onto your point there about legacy. So on the one hand, legacy isn't a useful framework for you based on Naval's perspective. Then on the other hand, we have this idea of legacy and the gravestone technique. For me, I don't know what it is, but I think about death a lot, and I think about what people will say, the immediate people around me when I die, and I genuinely feel like that makes me a better person, because on an almost daily basis, I think when I need to make a difficult decision of any kind, I think, all right, what would the guy that I really want to be do in this situation? And I then do that. It's like James Clear in Atomic Habits. The entire concept of habit formation is it's like casting votes in a ballot. You build a habit not by getting 100% and not by ticking off go to the gym every single day for a month, but doing it consistently enough. And sometimes not getting it right, but doing it consistently enough. And so this entire concept of death and therefore legacy really has an impact on me on a daily basis. So the end result is that I do more things, for other people. I make certain decisions based on the guy that I want to be.
Okay. I guess you're defining legacy there as sort of within days of your death rather than within decades of your death. I guess kind of the Naval point is more, and my point is more about like the decades are somewhat irrelevant. But I think, I agree with you, similar to gravestone technique, like what I want people to say at my funeral. I'd want them to think I'm, nice guy and good teacher, basically.
Brilliant. Yeah. Amazing. That's the end. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been nice to hang out IRL.